Christensen. I'm the Digital Marketing Services Manager here at Infotex. So we work across lots of digital services for clients. Tim's the campaign strategist who's in to help with any questions, just in case I panic. I'm just going to do a whistle-stop tour of search engine optimization, or SEO as it is known. So I'm just going to cover what is SEO, how do search engines work, why is SEO important, the evolution of SEO, moving into 2014, and top tips. So to start with, what is search engine optimization? Search engine optimization, or SEO, is a process of affecting the visibility of a website in organic or natural search. So let's start off with thinking about those terms, organic or natural search. This is a search for handbags, because that's what I like to search for. And we can see that in the top, you might not quite see it, there's a yellow block at the top that is the paid search results that is controlled through AdWords. Also that runs down the right hand side. So every time you click on one of those, it costs that company money. So if there's any competitors that you don't like very much, type in their term and click on their ad. Oh, you've recorded the same, that's probably not a good thing to say.
I'll just send you for free.
Thank you. At the top there, you've got product listing ads. That's reasonably new, and that runs across any sort of retail type term. So companies can actually have all their products feeding into Google. Again, that's a cost per click model. The main area we're going to be talking about is organic search results, and those are the main search results that run in the middle panel all the way down. So in terms of what search engine optimization is, it's controlling a number of different factors to try and get company websites as high up in these organic search listings as possible. To begin with, I'm going to talk through how search engines actually work, because I think that's quite important to understand how we then influence them to be able to start pushing up rankings. There are two major functions. The first one is crawling the internet and building an index, and the second one is providing answers to people by serving them the most relevant results. So to begin with, crawling. If we imagine that the internet is like a massive tube map, very big tube map, and the spiders or robots that the search engines have work their way through the internet as if they're going down a train line. Every time they hit a web page, it's like they've hit a train stop, and they actually start to record every time they hit one of these stops until they reach the end of the train line and the end of the website. So that's all done automatically. They then index everything they find. So every time they hit a train stop, they start to index what they found, as we say, until they get to the end of that website. The indexing is all held in massive servers across the world. So I'd love it to look like this, but instead it realistically looks like big machines that don't look as beautiful as this photo. The search engines, I'm going to mainly use Google because they are the biggest, particularly in the UK. They then have algorithms that look at over 20 different factors and use formulas to actually deliver the best results for the user. So the process happens with the user, they type in their search. The search engine then actually looks for clues to try and work out what that user is actually looking for. They pull the relevant documents from the index, from the big library. They rank the results, and the way that they do that is through these algorithms where they assess every single indexed page to see what is most relevant to that user. And then they display the results in the relevant order. So at the top, you've got the most relevant, or as search engines record, the most relevant, going down to hundreds and hundreds of pages of less relevant websites. So generally, the primary responsibility of a search engine is actually to serve relevant results to the user. And I'm going to use the term relevant a lot in this presentation, because if nothing else, you need to take away this feeling of everything needs to be really relevant for the user. Why is SEO important? The web is actually made up of 60 trillion individual pages. And that's a hell of a lot of individual pages that every single website is going to be competing on and trying to get into these search engine listings for all of these different pages. So firstly, your SEO is really important to give you even the slightest chance of being able to be found on the internet. Over 100 billion global searches are made on Google a month. So when people say, I don't tend to use Google, I don't click on things for Google, most people do. It's now a directory, it's replaced the yellow pages, it's now where everybody goes to find the answers. 93% of online experiences begin with a search engine, with the search engines. You will get traffic coming through to your website by people directly putting your web address into the bar, but the high majority of people actually start a search nowadays straight into Google. It might be that they're actually just searching for your web address, but people have become more and more lazy and use Google as the way to find things. And lastly, 15% of searches every single day have never been seen by Google before. And this is really important because it means that you've got to keep your SEO fresh and you've got to keep your websites fresh, because demand changes, the way that people talk about different services change every day, and you must keep it up to date, because eventually if you don't, you'll no longer be found under terms that you were once, maybe even just 2 years ago found under. For us to understand where SEO is now, we need to think about where it began. So I'm going to go through a very brief potted history of SEO and search engines. In 1994, web crawler was the first robot to start indexing the web. And it was through robots rather than humans, and it indexed 24 websites in 1994. By 1995, many of the big people such as Yahoo, AltaVista, Lycos of those days had come in and started to index many more pages. And the way that they did that was alphabetically, so actually it was like a directory. And that meant that the very early days of search engine optimization was basically making sure your website titles reflected what you were, so that you would actually go into that alphabetical list. By 1997, keywords were king, and this was the rise of what's known as keyword stuffing, where companies used to take their web pages, decide what keyword they wanted to be number one on, and put that keyword in about 50 times onto one page. And you still sometimes see it. I've seen one recently that was a garden site that had the term fire pits that had just been thrown in as many times as possible. And that worked in 1997 because the way that the search engine classed relevancy was actually as many times as possible your keyword being mentioned. By 1998, Google was born. Obviously, this actually completely changed the landscape in terms of search engines. Google actually they started Google in 1994, well, in the sense that Larry Page and Sergey Brin actually met in 1994 at university. By 1997, they had started their first search engine, which was called Backrub. Interesting fact for you all. By 1998, they had actually got investment for Google, and the name, in some ways, thank God, had changed. It'd be a bit weird if we were backrubbing everything nowadays, it'd be a bit strange. And actually, Google was a misspelling. Google was originally, it comes from the term that means 1 followed by 100 zeros, so a massive number, which is actually spelled G-O-O-G-L, and accidentally, when they registered the name, they misspelt it. So it's slightly an accident that Google is actually spelled as it is.
Probably why they got trademarked.
In 1999, there was a move and a shift towards easy to manipulate meta tags. Now, meta tags sit behind your website. So they are areas such as the page title, meta description, and meta keywords. And this was the rise of people filling the back of their website with lots of different meta keywords, like they were keyword stuffing the pages originally, but this wouldn't actually show to the user. So people would rank actually from manipulating the back end of their site rather than the user side of things.
So these are things that are in the makeup of your website, but they don't necessarily show.
Exactly, and actually meta keywords there's three main areas, which is the page title, meta description, and meta keywords. Meta keywords have completely been dropped by search engines now. So you'll still see if you log into certain websites, you've got an area for meta keywords. It's an absolute waste of time to include anything in there. Google does still look at page title, that is still important, and meta description in terms of ranking, it no longer is taken into account, but the meta description is seen in the actual search engine but not on the site, and that's the bit of description that goes below the title. So we advise it's worth making those quite interesting because it's what's going to encourage people to actually click on your website, on your web link. But in those days, in 1999, all of those would be filled with relevant keywords. It wouldn't matter of how it read towards the user. It was all spamming basically with keywords. By 2001, because of the interest, the rise of Google, link building started to really increase, and this was because Google started to actually say, we're not so bothered at the moment about your actual website in terms of what the content is on there. We want to know how many people are linking to your website. Because in their eyes, the more people that link to their website, the higher the authority they were in that area, and the higher they should be in the search rankings and the more relevant they were. This backfired slightly on Google and on the search engines in general, because people started to link farm. So you would have people who would buy thousands and thousands of links to their website, which could have linked from anything, from porn sites, from pharmaceutical sites, gambling sites, but it was a link, so it gave them a point, so to speak. So in 2003, the Florida update to the Google algorithm, and you'll notice they name them random things all the way through, shook up the industry quite significantly because they started to say, right, we're reducing how important the links actually are to your website, to try and reduce this link farming. In 2004, Facebook was launched, and although obviously it completely changed the digital marketing landscape, it also slightly changed in terms of SEO because the actual social content was starting to be used from the search engines. And also now, actually, your social links are taken into account with your rankings, so it is worth bearing that in mind. It's not just for engagement. 2009, as social media continued to rise with Twitter and Facebook and Snapchat and everything else, content also started to become very important. And people have been talking about content being king for many years. But it was really in 2009 that it started to really impact the search engine listings. And from that perspective, it was trying to get as many content pages into your site that was talking about your topics, and it was trying to show to Google that you did know what you were talking about on the subject. Once again, though, in 2011, there was a release of the Panda algorithm update. And this was to try and stop content farms. And what had happened with the rise in the importance of content is you would get a lot of companies that would write huge amounts of content for companies that weren't really that relevant to the business, but was actually increasing their rankings because they had so much content on the site. So Panda was updated in 2011, and actually this update was pretty huge. It affected 12% of search results, which was, for a lot of companies, was a massive impact into their campaigns. Penguin, another update, was then released in 2012, and this was because there were still problems with bad links and companies still benefiting from just simply having lots of links. This had a huge impact. Penguin, when Penguin was released, companies such as even as big as Interflora were thrown out of Google, because they were heavily penalised for all the bad links they had. And this really did shake up SEO and the approach to SEO. We will talk about the approach now, which was reflected by these changes.
I mean, is that the same, these links, is that the same as the microsite issue, or is that a separate thing?
This is more in terms of links, people buying links.
Right.
So it was the aggregators of huge amounts of links that people were buying that were not good quality and not relevant, so it's not really that certain. In 2013, another release happened. As you can see, Google got very busy in the last few years just to keep us on our toes, and that was Hummingbird. And this was actually more of a shift in terms of algorithm to better the user experience in terms of how Google reacted to searches than it was trying to stop the sort of the black hat, as we call it, SEO works that people have been doing. So Hummingbird shifted to really trying to make Google work as if it was a human being. So it now, and you will probably as a user not have seen it as much, but it will start over the next few years to really come about that when you search for questions, when you search for more in-depth queries into Google, they are trying to make Google read your question as a human being would and deliver content based on that query. So before, if, for example, somebody searched for does the Queen have any siblings, Google would have looked at keywords in that query and matched those keywords. So it would have said, okay, we need to give some resource on the Queen, and the first link would probably have been Wikipedia, because that has all the resources, and maybe the Royals website. Now if you search, actually right at the top of your search, it shows the Queen has a sibling, and she is so-and-so, and she has all the links to her straight away, the top link. So there's a massive shift towards actually understanding what your user is trying to search for. Moving into 2014, there are three main areas I'm going to cover in terms of ranking factors that you need to be thinking about. As I said earlier on, actually Google has 200 different factors it looks into the algorithm. We can make some really good guesses of a number of them, but there are always going to be ones that are just that we'll never really 100% understand. But these are three main topic areas that cover a number of the factors that you can start to influence. So I'm going to cover technical SEO, relevancy, and authority. So technical SEO, the first area, and this is all relating to your actual website. So indexation, it may sound obvious, but you need to make sure that the search engines can actually index your website. And we see a number of websites that we look at that have errors on their pages, so that it stops Google searching all the way through. There's lots of duplicate content, which means that Google will actually only really read one page. If you've got 5 pages with basically the same content on it, it can't distinguish what you're trying to get to. And also things like 404s, so checking if URLs are broken and those kind of things. Indexation also works the other way, that there might be pages that are being shown of your website that you don't want to show in search engines. So for example, if you've got a private area to your website that you don't want the public to see, you can actually set it up so those pages won't be indexed. So it's actually just as important to make sure that the search engines aren't showing the pages that you don't want them to, just as much as it is that they are showing the right pages. Information architecture. And this is, as we were talking about with the tube picture and the spiders crawling through, we've got to make sure that it's really easy for the spiders to get through. So, for example, if you've got content that sits 7 or 8 clicks into your home page, it's going to take the spiders longer to get to that stage. And as it progresses through the site, those pages become less and less important to the spider in terms of SEO. So we try and say that we said that you should try and actually have your content within as few as 3 clicks for the customer, because not only is it good for the user, but it's also good for the crawling and for the robots to find that content as quick as possible. On-page SEO we've touched on very slightly, but these are your page titles, so making sure that they are really relevant to the keywords you want people to find you under. Also, if you have a local business, it's important to try and get your location in those page titles, because if you're a coffee shop in Woodbridge, if you just had your page title, for example, as coffee shop, well, that's not really giving Google an indication of where you are, whereas coffee shop in Woodbridge, it can straight away understand you are a local company. The URLs need to all be friendly, so if you look at your web addresses, particularly past your homepage, and you see that there are lots of numbers in there, it doesn't have an explanation of what the page is, Google won't know, just as much as a user looking at it. You wouldn't want to use it in a press ad, so Google's not going to understand what it means. Navigation needs to be clear in terms of all your naming of your navigation and in ensuring that your paths through your navigation are as smooth as possible. Your H1s are your header title tags. So again, that's something else that Google does look at. So just bearing in mind that if your headers are quite generic and quite broad, about might be one, for example, that doesn't mean anything to Google. So just trying to think again of getting your keywords into those kind of areas, but without overly spamming them. And copy, and we've talked about keyword stuffing. Do not keyword stuff your pages, because it's not good for the user and it's not good for Google. But when you do write content, and I will touch on content in a minute, but write it for the user and write it and think about the kind of keywords you want to be on, but just trying to keep them in your copy in a natural way that a user's not going to read your website and think, what on earth was that person going on? I understand they sell fire pits, but I didn't need to be told 15 times in a paragraph. Relevancy is much more about copy and content. And the important thing to do when you are thinking about copy and content for your website is actually research it first. You've got to think about what customers are actually searching for. And I think a really good example actually is when you talk to businesses that use acronyms, for example SEO, and they use internal terms for their products. A customer's not going to know those terms. And there's the amount of websites you go on and you think, I just don't really know what that is. There are tools that you can use that you can start searching for actually how customers do refer to your products. And it's really surprising sometimes when you've got, or products or services, when you've got 3 terms that different people you'd use for different services, to actually see user tools to see what's searched for most can be really useful, because we can all assume these things, but actually sometimes it's quite surprising. Even things like if people search for things in a singular versus plural manner, it can be quite a difference in terms of search terms. But also think about how competitive these key terms are. I'm afraid if you're trying to get to number 1 on in organic search on the term handbag, I can tell you now there's no chance you're going to do it, because you're competing against Amazon and John Lewis and eBay and all of those people. It's just not going to happen. Whereas if you're a handbag producer in Woodbridge or in Suffolk, it's much more likely that that's going to actually be a term that you will be able to rank on, and ultimately the kind of people you want to sell to. Also start thinking, as we touched on with the Hummingbird update, in terms of what is the intent of the searcher. The main push that Google is trying to do is that people start to actually answer questions in their content. So think about what kind of questions your users will be asking. An example, we were playing with Siri yesterday, and I said to Siri, what's the best coffee shop in Woodbridge? And my good old Siri said to me, here is a list of the best coffee shops in Woodbridge ranked in order of reviews. And Honey and Harvey won, so that's nice to see. But it's the way that people want, this is the kind of information people want. So you need to try and think about your content to deliver that information and to deliver answers to your customers.
I'm surprised Siri knew you were in the UK, because Siri thinks we're in Suffolk in America. Always the weather is in Suffolk, America. Yeah.
Unless there's a Honey and Harvey in it, that'd be quite scary. You never know.
I'll go for coffee.
Also think about the chance of conversion in terms of the type of content you're writing. I have seen before people writing content. There has been great content, for example, top 10 restaurants in the so-and-so area. Great content. It's not related to their service, and that means the problem is you get lots of visitors coming to your site just to read that review and then leave. I mean, it's nice to get the traffic through, but ultimately you want people to convert on your site. So think about what your customers are asking in terms of your services. You can include some more sort of fluffy content around it, but try and stay on track with what they're actually looking for. Google made another big change last year that's rocked the SEO boat, which was they no longer record and report on the keywords that people come through organic search. So rewind about a year ago, we could go into Google Analytics and we could tell you exactly what keywords people had come to your site on, and would be able to say, yep, that keyword X, is the best converting for you. People spend more time on the site through this keyword, etc., etc. They don't do that anymore. They've completely pulled that, so it now shows as not set. So if you do go into Google Analytics and see lots of not sets, it's not that your Google Analytics is broken, it's that Google is being a bit of a pain. And one of the reasons they have done this is to push for people to use paid search. Ultimately, they're in the game to make money, so this is one of the ways for them to do so. Paid search is really good, however, to be able to run a short trial on and then take those learnings from that trial and put it into your SEO and your content strategy. So I would say it is worth that investment in doing so before you invest in search engine optimization. Most importantly is write quality content, and I've touched on this in a number of points, but match the user intent but serve business objectives. So that's just reinforcing the fact that you've got to sort of try and stay a bit on track in terms of what content you are providing to your user. Structure is also important in the terms of relevancy, so make sure that the structure of your site is all logical, that you're delivering internal links that are logical and relevant to the pages that people are already on, and that will encourage people to work their way through the site and ultimately for Google to start to see that your site is really relevant to those people. We also have to bear in mind that Google is slowly pushing people to use more and more of their products. Again, we understand why, they are a business. So for example, Google Analytics is owned by Google, obviously, and they can see a lot of different metrics through that. So they can understand from your Google Analytics where there are loopholes in your structure that aren't relevant to the searches that people are doing. So it is important to just keep on top of making sure that that is all working properly. The last ranking factor is authority, and this mainly comes from creating something of value. The big companies that do it very well are, a lot of them are the research companies. E-consultancy is a very good one that creates lots and lots of content of great value. And what they do is provide free content to people, and in return, we get subscriptions with them, we join them for membership because their content is really valuable. So make sure that your content is incredibly valuable to people and that people, try and encourage people to share it. So have Facebook share buttons on your page next to your content so it's easy for people to share on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. And also just bear in mind when you're writing it, would you share something like that with somebody in your industry? And if you feel that content you would share, then I think it's a good nod towards actually writing it and publishing it. Also, if you do have social media, make sure that you share anything that you write on there. I know it sounds quite obvious, but across all your social media, you should, including Google+, which a lot of people forget about, you should be just pushing out any content that you do write. SEO should still be part of your overall strategy, however. So we've touched on paid search, but paid search and SEO work very well hand in hand. It's great for keyword research and conversion data, but it's also really good for testing and prioritization. And I think a lot of people don't actually understand how good paid search is for testing. You can, within a couple of weeks, understand, if you've got lots and lots of traffic, within days, you can understand which messages people react better to. So you can actually test 5 different pieces of ad copy against one keyword and start to understand, okay, people refer much more to click here for a brochure rather than download a brochure here. It's simple things, even just testing branding strap lines can work brilliantly in paid search, and that's a really underutilised part of paid search that people don't use. Content marketing, SEO should be completely part of your content marketing strategy, and if you work with PR companies, it should be that your PR and your SEO companies are working together. Content needs to be shareable and engaging, but don't miss out on the fact that you can make sure that it's optimised for search engines while it's written. And social now impacts rankings. So having a Facebook page and Twitter page, having your content shared a lot, Google sees this and it does help with your rankings. Google Plus, another Google product, was actually launched to compete with Facebook, and it didn't, because people couldn't be bothered to move all of their lives off Facebook and into Google Plus. So Google changed its tact slightly and decided that instead of doing it for day-to-day consumers, they pushed it towards businesses, and they do take into account if you've got a Google Plus page and it does help particularly with local rankings. So again, if you do nothing else, and you don't have a Google Plus page, that's the first thing I would go and do. It's completely free. Put in as much information as you can. Put images in there. Keep it up to date, and it does help. And now they take up quite a big amount of the real estate in Google listings, so it's really worthwhile doing. And social is obviously also good for spreading engagement, so don't forget that it's a really good tool to be able to talk to people who are prospective customers. And that could be on, for example, Facebook and Twitter might not be right for your customers, but LinkedIn is a really good area for B2B. Facebook's great if you've got lots of images to share. Twitter's great if you have something that you just can talk about quite a lot in short snippets. So just finally, my top tips. Get your house in order. So that's actually, have a look at your website, make sure the structure is logical, make sure you do have your page titles that have been optimised, you have some good meta descriptions, that you don't have duplicates in there, and check that technically it's all in line. Create appealing content. You want your content to be shared, so make it interesting and make it appealing. Answer questions throughout your site. So that's not only on your content, make sure you have a frequently asked questions page if that's relevant to your services or your products. Keep creating content. Google does see if a site is kept up to date. The more often you update it, the more Google is going to understand that you've invested in this website and you're trying to deliver interesting resources to your customer. So it doesn't have to be that you write a massive blog post every day, but actually a small blog post each week is an easy way to keep that fresh content going throughout your site. Encourage sharing of content, as we've said. If you've got social media, push your content out. If you try and get links on your website to make it easy for people to share. Don't have any duplicate content. And one area that really suffers with this is actually things like e-commerce, where people just copy and paste descriptions across all of different products that are very similar. That doesn't help Google because they just see you've got one product really. Also, don't duplicate content, and not just from a legal perspective, but don't copy and paste paragraphs off other people's websites, because again, Google will see that there's another site that's got that was there before you, and it's not going to really count it. Only have high quality links. Low quality links are really not worth it. If you get somebody phoning you up and offering you SEO for £500 and they're going to deliver 1,000 links, it is too good to be true. I promise you, it is too good to be true. You will either very quickly be penalised by Google, or it will be an absolute waste of money. Either way, you're not going to benefit from it. And most importantly, build and write for users and not searchers. It is worthwhile doing your research and seeing what your searchers are looking for, so you can use that language and those key terms when you are writing. But really think about what your users are looking for and what they want from your site. Google wants people to be like human beings. They want the websites to be like human beings, and they want to deliver the most relevant content to those users. So just think about that, giving value all the time whenever you're writing for your website. And thank you for your time.